Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Monday, February 22nd, 5:30 in the morning here in Calgary, Alberta. I'm just waking up, having a coffee, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad that you can be here. And this is just a 15-minute show, Monday through Friday, just to talk about child abuse issues and related issues, and just to be, a voice of encouragement for people out there who, are adult survivors of child abuse and just having a hard time, and just to be a support person and say, look, you're not alone. It's a sad fact. There's a lot of us out there, and that if you keep reaching out and keep looking for the help, the good help that you find that you're comfortable with, perhaps a group setting or a good friend or a therapist or something. There's good help out there, and so I thought, I should. If I'm going to do a Blog Talk Radio, I should do a daily chat just to encourage people and stuff. So that's what this show is all about. And I'm glad you could be here. And this week we're going to look at a few different topics this week. We started on Friday looking at understanding child maltreatment and juvenile delinquency, the research. And that's by Kathy Spatz-Whittam, PhD. And I got the website, www.cwla.org. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. And the rest of the article will follow this week. We'll probably finish that up just in a couple of days. It's not that long. It's not that large of an article, but it's important to look at that. The link between juvenile delinquency and child abuse and neglect, because it's huge. Excuse me. And I know so many people when I was growing up who were doing, who were involved in juvenile delinquency and out getting in trouble, and really their home lives were just horrible. And that's pretty much, I could see in my own family that was the case. So I'm glad you could be here. And this is just not a professional show, and I ask everyone to listen at their own discretion. And because I cover the whole purpose of this show is to cover topics of abuse. So the material is sensitive, and so if you have a sensitivity to the subject of abuse, please don't listen to the show. Just turn it off. And if you're someone who's under the age of 18, especially a younger person, this show is ultimately about you. But the thing is because I fight for child rights, human rights, I'm an advocate for child rights, and I advocate for the prevention, awareness, and education regarding child abuse, eventually to stop child abuse. That's my mission. But if you're a young person, you might have questions when you're listening to some of this stuff, and it's better to have someone to listen to it with you, I think, because they can help guide you and help you find the answers. And also, it's some of the material's upsetting, so I wouldn't want anybody to be upset. So young people especially, if you haven't heard a whole lot about abuse, you might want to listen to this with a teacher, a counselor, a coach, a school counselor, or let's say you have a teacher who has a few minutes to listen to this with you, just to make sure that it's something that you should be listening to, right? It's just very important to me because there's so many crazy, really psychotic people out there who are, as far as online safety goes, we're going to cover that. And it's so huge, and that's why I just really highly recommend that young people, if you're listening to this on a player, anyone under the age of 18, make sure you have, permission to listen to this, because it is really important for me, because I was a victim of child abuse and all kinds of abuse, and almost like kidnapped 5 times. I was on the streets quite a bit, running around and where I shouldn't have been. And I know there are crazy people out there, so that's the whole issue, right? You'd be doing yourself a favor and me a favor by getting someone to listen to this with you. So it's very important to me, because I care about people, I care about children, I care about your safety, and I really think, I just hope there's someone in your life that cares about what you're listening to and what you're looking at online. I really do. It's my wish for you. So we'll get right into this article. We started on Friday, and I'll just kind of reread a little bit of it. They said, this research is actually quite old, but they said, this is Kathy Spatz-Whittam talking. She says, over the past 20 years, child maltreatment researchers and practitioners, as well as those in the field of criminal justice, have been increasingly concerned about the long-term negative consequences of child abuse and neglect, and the increased likelihood of abused and neglected youth to be involved in the juvenile justice system. They said, although no single factor by itself is likely to account for the development of criminal behavior, the importance of childhood victimization as a risk factor for subsequent delinquency and violence has become increasingly recognized. So they said research on the relationship between child maltreatment and juvenile delinquency. Several early reviews of studies examining the relationship between child maltreatment and delinquency concluded that knowledge about this relationship was limited because of the methodological problems inherent in prior studies. So they did some studies, but they found that the studies just weren't, there was problems with it just because of the way that they went about the studies. They were in, there was lack of control in the comparison groups. You can read along there and see that for yourself. www.cwla.org, and this is Understanding Child Maltreatment and Juvenile Delinquency, the research by Kathy Spatz-Whittam. So you can always pull that up on your computer and read along. They did say that they did some studies and stuff, and they have some tables and things and all kinds of charts, which I'm not going to go into because it's just chart material. But I wanted to just continue on with reading what they had written here. They said there's a bunch of the studies that they did. The Midwest study also found that child abuse and neglect was associated with earlier onset of juvenile crime. Abused and neglected children were first arrested about a year earlier than their matched non-abused and non-neglected peers, and were more likely to become recidivists and chronic offenders. And they have that on a table there on table 2. It says, we read this on Friday, as part of the Rochester Youth Development Study, Smith and Thornberry collected information on child abuse and neglect for their cohort of youth in upstate New York from the Department of Social Services in Rochester. And they extended prior research by comparing official arrest records to youth self-reports, despite differences in geographic region, time, period, and assessment technique. The findings from the Rochester Youth Study confirmed a significant relationship between child maltreatment and delinquency, self-reported and official, and these youth were approximately 17 years old at the time of the study, and thus information on adult criminal behavior was not yet available. So these are from youths, right, 17 years of age about. And a third geographic area provided the basis for another test of the childhood victimization delinquency relationship using maltreated children and 2 non-maltreated comparison samples from Mecklenburg County, North Carolina in 1993. See, these are old studies, right? They found that maltreated children, approximately age 15, had higher rates of delinquency complaints than non-maltreated school children and impoverished children. So compared with the school sample, the maltreated youth had a higher rate of delinquency complaints for violence as well. And effect size was diminished when the authors controlled for demographic and family structure variables. So the fourth study, which was designed as a replication and extension of Whittam's original study, was based on a cohort of abused and neglected children from a different geographic region of the country, the Northwest, a different time period, which was between 1980 and 1985, and a different ethnic background, including Native Americans in addition to whites and African Americans. So they really changed the model for this one, right? And they said the researchers selected substantiated cases of child abuse and or neglect with court dependency records in a large urban area of Washington State, and they identified a matched control group of children on the basis of age, race, ethnicity, gender, and approximate family social class. And the dependent children in the Northwest study represent a subset of abused and neglected children whose cases were substantiated and for whom there was sufficient evidence to remove the children from the home. So they did a really serious study. Abused and neglected children were 4.8 times more likely to be arrested as juveniles and 11 times more likely to be arrested for a violent crime than the matched controls. So they said despite differences in geographic region, time period, youth's ages, definition of child maltreatment, and assessment technique, these 4 prospective investigations all provide evidence for the connection between child maltreatment and subsequent crime and delinquency. Excuse me. These types of replications provide an opportunity to advance scientific knowledge, and when results from studies with different subject samples, time periods, and geographic areas converge, this increases confidence in the generalizability of the findings. And so that's, it's good. They're really looking into it, and I'm sure they're still looking into it. It's a huge issue. It says this means that all abused and neglected children do not become delinquent. I mean, obviously, that's the truth. It's just that there's a real link to it. And this result is especially important for policymakers and practitioners so as to avoid damaging self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Yeah, the study, it's very important to have the facts. And even though this is an old article, I just thought I'd bring it up because it's quite interesting how they, how they're looking at it and how they're coming, to a conclusion that it is, there is a real link, and that the youth that were maltreated and abused were 11% more likely to be arrested for a violent crime than the matched controls, and 4.8 times more likely to be arrested as juveniles. So there is a significant jump there. And then they go on and they talk about the cycle of violence. Another issue addressed by these investigators is the extent to which children who experience violence in childhood, for example, those physically abused, will progress to become perpetrators of violence when they grow up. According to a strict interpretation of the cycle of violence hypothesis, one would expect that children who were physically abused, in contrast to other forms of child abuse or neglect, would have the highest risk of arrest for violent criminal behavior. That is, being the direct victim of violence as a child is thought to provide a model for the child to learn, imitate, and act in a violent manner when the child grows up. So they said here, both the Western and Northwestern authors analyzed their findings by looking at arrest rates as a function of the type of abuse or neglect. In these studies, physical abuse was associated with the highest risk of arrest for subsequent violence, but neglect was also found to be related to violence. In the Midwest study, Whittam reported that physical abuse was associated with the highest risk of arrest for violent crime, but neglected children were also at higher risk compared to with matched controls. Looking beyond delinquency and into young adulthood, Maxfield and Whittam reported that rates of arrest for violent crime were 21% for physically abused children and 20% for neglected children, compared with 14% for matched controls. So the neglected children and the physically abused children were right about the same as far as violence, being arrested for a violent crime. So I think that's just so interesting. We've got about 3 minutes left. The Northwestern findings replicated the earlier work and revealed that children who were physically abused and neglected are at increased risk for arrest for violence. However, these findings also extended the earlier work by examining the risk of arrest for a violent crime for children who had experienced emotional maltreatment, and nearly 1/3 of the children experiencing physical abuse, neglect, and emotional maltreatment were arrested for a violent crime. Of the children who experienced multiple types of child maltreatment, 23.9% had an arrest for a violent crime, whereas the comparison group children had the lowest rates of arrest, right? That's quite interesting. I really think it is. Just the link, the whole information here about that. These two prospective investigations with different groups of abused and neglected children from different time periods and geographic regions reveal that experiencing violence as a child leads to increased risk of being arrested for a violent crime. However, these results also make clear that childhood neglect and emotional maltreatment are associated with violence as well. And so, it doesn't have to be physical. It can be emotional neglect, emotional abuse, neglect, and other types of abuse that would cause people to do these, to young people to be arrested, or anyone even to be arrested for a violent crime. So it's just it's so sad to see this. Well, we got about a minute left, and I guess tomorrow we're going to cover other consequences, implications, and whatnot. We're going to finish up this part of the article, and there's another piece to it too that we'll look at maybe Wednesday. And I just thank you so much for tuning in. And I have some great information and websites. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dream Catchers for Abused Children, and I just hope that you'll check their website out. They have some great information on there. I love that website, and they have so much good information, and they're so proactive on prevention and awareness and education surrounding child abuse, and they are 100% proactive in preventing child abuse. So if you don't know quite how to report child abuse, or you're not sure what the signs are to look for, that's where you can go. It's great. Well, there's other websites too, but I'm a volunteer. I'm the Canada Regional Director. So that's why I promote their website, and I also love it, and I found some great information there. So I highly recommend it, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. And then there's like Little Warriors. I love Little Warriors, www.littlewarriors.ca, and there's lots of information about internet safety, what is child sexual abuse, adult responsibility, prevention. So you can go check that website out. Great website. I'll be back on tonight at 9:30 doing child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. And we're looking at a Survivor to Thriver manual that I found off of the ASCA support network. And so I hope you have a great day. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and take care, everybody. Bye-bye.